In 1650, female intellect was a social transgression. For a woman in Puritan America, the mechanics of mass communication were exclusively male domains. Anne Bradstreet's book, The 10th Muse, was a historical anomaly. It entered this hostile environment carrying a bold identifying mark on its title page, written by a gentlewoman in those parts. Publication was a gamble that risked her social standing. To protect herself from ruin, Bradstreet required an ironclad defense mechanism that functioned as both an apology and an argument. She engineered that defense into the prologue, the very first poem in the volume. It stands as a buffer between her work and a skeptical audience. Bradstreet uses a matrix of feigned humility to manage her critics. She adopts the language of submission to dismantle the patriarchal logic used to keep her silent. The prologue functions as a rhetorical Trojan horse. On the surface, the text is heavy with self-deprecation. Bradstreet uses these claims to lower the defenses of her male readers. Underneath that submissive layer, she builds a proto-feminist legal brief in the subtext. Tracing the mechanics of her argument requires reading the poem chronologically, while measuring her semantic claims of weakness against her actual structural execution. To understand Bradstreet is to see past the mandatory apologies and uncover the rhetoric of a writer proving she belongs in the literary record. Bradstreet begins by seeding the high subjects. She declares that singing of wars, captains, and cities are themes for male poets and historians, while her work will not dim their worth. She uses synecdoche, where a part represents the whole, when she refers to her mean pen. By combining this with litotes, deliberate understatement, she frames her obscure lines as inherently mediocre. This creates a baseline of modesty. She adopts a posture of weakness to shield herself from the charge of intellectual arrogance. This posture continues as she references Guillaume du Bartas. She deliberately juxtaposes the wonder she feels for his work with the envy in her own heart. By placing herself safely beneath a poet the Puritans already admired, she anchors herself in the established literary hierarchy. These opening stanzas build a shield of submissiveness, ensuring her critics feel their authority remains intact. The true argument, however, is found in how the poem is built, rather than what it says. In stanza 4, Bradstreet claims her muse is foolish, broken, blemished, and that no art is able to mend her natural defects. The paradox is that she delivers this claim of intellectual weakness through a highly demanding poetic form. Mapping the meter reveals that she is writing in flawless iambic pentameter. The rhythm is mathematically consistent. She utilizes a complex A-B-A-B-C-C rhyme scheme and enjambment. This is the Shakespearean Venus and Adonis stanza, one of the more difficult forms in the English language. Her technical mastery contradicts her own claims. The poem is a physical proof that her intellect is not broken or blemished, as she suggests. Bradstreet pivots her argument using an allusion to the Greek orator Demosthenes. She compares her weak brain to his speech impediment, using the aphorism, "A weak or wounded brain admits no cure," to feign a biological limitation that cannot be fixed by effort. She then addresses critics who claim a needle better fits her hand than a pen. This engraving illustrates the domestic confinement Bradstreet was expected to inhabit. Here, the needle represents forced domesticity, while the pen represents the forbidden intellect. She employs irony to expose the double standard of her era. She notes that even if she writes well, men will simply claim she stole the work or succeeded by chance. Bradstreet uses this stanza to publicly diagnose the unwinnable conditions placed on female writers in the 17th century. She now pivots from defense to offense, using classical history to challenge her Puritan critics. She asks a devastating rhetorical question. If women are intellectually inferior, why did the ancient Greeks personify the 9 muses as women? She points out that poetry itself was made Calliope's own child, placing women at the very origin of the arts. Bradstreet uses the metaphor of the weak knot to describe the link between women and the arts, predicting that modern men will try to untie this historical fact to serve their own interests. She uses classical history to reveal the contradictions in the gender roles enforced by 17th century Christian patriarchy. In the final stanzas, Bradstreet executes a tactical retreat from her aggressive classical argument. She grants precedency to men, stating they can do best and that women know it well. In exchange for yielding this ground, she asks only for some small acknowledgement of women's work. This false surrender disarms her readers. By acknowledging male preeminence, she secures the space necessary to finish her argument without interference. This concession creates a false sense of security in the male reader, just as she prepares the final maneuver. In the final couplet, Bradstreet asks for a humble thyme or parsley wreath, rather than the laurel bays reserved for the high-flown male poets. She utilizes a brilliant contrast, claiming her unrefined ore makes the men's glistering gold shine brighter. She secures her right to print by framing herself as a tool to enhance the male ego. Rejecting her poetry rejects the backdrop, making their work superior. The rhythmic snap of the final rhyming couplet closes the argument with absolute finality. Bradstreet secures a permanent place in the literary record by framing her structural mastery as the proof of the equality she spent the poem pretending to concede.